Hello and welcome to Computer Tech and More. Today I'm going to be adding epoxy to my son's drawing table for outside picnic use. Yes, I know we're getting pretty late in the year, but I selected this RTG Supply Co. Wood Rot Repair brand because it's an epoxy, it's good for outdoor use, had good thermal properties on the website, so it can take both high and low temperatures. But I need to get right into it because I've already mixed these together in a 2-to-1 ratio. That's by volume. So you need a container. I just used a 1 quart mixing. Paintbrush. The paintbrush is used for this wooden area or anywhere you need little details. So you'll notice that I have just some paper down to protect my flooring. And so this epoxy is to protect the wood from weather. I was specifically purchased it for this wood right here, as opposed to the back area where it's a different type of wood. So the front is basically like a board for shelving inside the house, and I found it to be very soft. Let's see, can you see the little dent marks and scratch marks in it? So I used it in conjunction together with a outdoor pressure treated wood. So we're gonna go over these steps. So right now I'm just applying the epoxy to the vertical surface, painting the back. I decided I wanted to have a little layer on the even the pressure treated wood, which is the custom cut bit on the back, just because the epoxy on the main area kind of sealed up the edges. So it became a very permanent table. So I just decided to seal everything up. And this kind of epoxy can be used on rotten wood and stuff like that to essentially bring it back to life, to be able to continue using it. Of course, if the wood is too rotten, it's not going to work. But this does seep into the pores of the wood, which is why it can be used on rotten wood. And so that way it's just kind of embedded in the grains of the wood. So it'll help keep out moisture and water. Well, water is moisture, snow, and all that kind of stuff. So the paintbrush I'm using is just some generic one I found on Amazon. And the paintbrush, basically once it's done with this epoxy, it's going to be useless for anything else. The epoxy is going to seep into the pores. So that's just a note when you're doing this, that this paintbrush is a solo tasker at this point, and you want the wood to, you want to make sure that there's as little grass and stuff as possible. You can see that, some things got on my table. A bug actually landed on it while the epoxy was still damp, and well, it got itself trapped, so I kind of peeled off its carcass. But yeah, right now I'm just kind of painting the edges. So you might kind of recognize this design from when I did my power tool video. And this table is its second iteration. My first one I made using, now I'm gonna just kind of seal across the whole surface. Anyways, you may recognize this basic design from when I talked about power tools in one of my other videos. And I ended up redoing it. Yeah, I ended up redoing it with this because that one, I kept having sealing issues. It was falling apart. So the seam in it, which you can see in the two different colors woods, I don't have big enough clamps. So I glued it together, I sealed it together as best as I could, but it's still split on itself on a hot day. So I then cut out some of the glue and filled it with Gorilla Glue, the expanding foam kind, and just got as much glue in there as I possibly could, and tried to seal it up. I covered it with a wood filler, like the if you get a dent in a board and you're just kind of trying to disguise it, that kind of stuff. And well, it all just kind of split on me and looked really bad. I painted it. It formed cracks at the seams across all of them, and I just didn't know what to do with it at that point, so I converted it to a little sandbox for my son, and it works really great as that. In order to do this to that, I would have had to get off all the paint. This works because there's no paint on the board at all. And the epoxy layer should help kind of seal everything together very nicely. The first layer I did, the epoxy got everywhere. Everywhere there was a seam, the epoxy got out. And it just made a big old mess on my floor. I didn't have this paper out yet. I've never done epoxy work before, so you live and learn. But after the first layer got hardened and dried, it looks really good. And I just have this little generic heater, that's the brand, sitting in my garage. This was low fume, but it's still strong enough. It says it's fine for indoor use, but I don't think it is. So I had it done in my garage. It's a little bit cold where I live, so I have a heater blowing hot air on it. It's not fast enough air to cause like ripples in it, but it creates a nice warm waft across this. And this epoxy is nice in that I can sand it, prime it, and then paint it, which is actually my plan. I'm going to paint over this and give it the colors of my kid's table. But yeah, that's I think that's all I have to say about this epoxy. I just finished using it up and spreading it out, and I'm gonna set up the heater to blast across it, and I guess I'll add the last bit when I've got it nice and hard. It should take about 4 days for this to seal up. Okay, what tools did I use? I just have this plastic core container. Seems to work just fine. The epoxy doesn't seem to get too hot to melt it, so it works fine. It has little measuring lines on the side. I had this rubber scraper. I used it for spreading out the epoxy to make a more even coat. And again, just a paintbrush. You can wear gloves or be extraordinarily careful and don't let it touch your hands. You're going to need a way to contain the epoxy, so you can see that there's some old and wet in there, and it will kind of drip off the sides, so you may need to push down on the cardboard to keep everything from sticking to each other periodically. A mask for woodwork and whatever use is usually recommended. And in order for it to set, it needs to be over 50 degrees, which is, again, why I have that heater. Or maybe not again, I don't know where I'm going to put this in the video. But you need a heater so that it reaches the proper temperature. And that's the basic equipment that you're going to need. This is the product page for the RTG Wood Rot Repair Epoxy. And focus. So harden and seal damaged wood, and it's for outdoor use, and states on there that it's waterproof. And the other one that I was looking at was this one, this wood hardener. And the reason I ended up not going with this one, despite them being a overall similar price, really came down to the fact that this one did not create a waterproof seal. So needed priming and painting, even though that it hardens the wood and really would actually kind of suit the purpose for about the same price. But this was the other product I looked at. So you would seal it, harden it, repaint it. So it basically kind of made the wood more like, or make the rotten wood more like normal wood again. Anyways, just wanted to show the other product that I was considering. One more quick thing about how I did the enamel. I've done 3 layers across 2 days now, where the first one I kind of did it at, what time was it? 1 o'clock? And then I added a second layer at 11 o'clock. And then a full day later, I've applied this layer that was in the video at about 1 o'clock again. So I know that it works, it seeps through the boards, and the difference between doing an epoxy layer and doing something like an enamel is that the epoxy seeps into the wood itself to help waterproof kind of the wood by filling in the gaps, I guess. If someone has a better explanation on, this is the first time I've done epoxy, but that's kind of what it seemed like I read. And then it adds a hard layer on top of it, while doing like an enamel is just a coating on the top. And this just seemed the better application for my usage. And again, I really want to be able to paint it, but there are applications of using epoxy that you can put the pigments into it and create the color you want itself. But I wanted to color match the table that I had already, so I went with this as opposed to just like a wood rot repair, which was another option I was looking at. All right, I let the epoxy harden, cure for 4 or 5 days, and I just sanded it down, and I'm applying my primer to it to give it the color finish that I want. The epoxy looked really good on its own, and it would have provided a waterproof layer, so I didn't necessarily need the paint on it, but I wanted a paint look. And one other note with the epoxy, I noticed that when holding it in areas, it left a kind of a residue on my finger. I don't know if it was really residue or per se something coming off, but it just really felt kind of odd. So that's the other reason I decided to paint over it, because this epoxy might specifically be meant for wrought wood as opposed to just the other epoxies that are on the market for like tabletops and final surfaces. And the primer I'm using is this, what's that, Kills 2 all-purpose interior exterior primer, sealer and stain blocker. I just bought this at Home Depot, I believe, because it can work outside. That was pretty much the only reason I chose this specific one, is for the outdoor use. And then it's going to get a coat of outdoor paint. All right, I'll see you guys with the either mid-step painting for exterior use or when it's all done. All right, this is what the near finished tabletop looks like. I haven't decided if I'm going to apply the charcoal, or not the charcoal, the blackboard paint that I had done previously, or if I'm going to just do half of it. But I wanted just something to winterize the materials so I could cover up like the chalk part and everything else at the table. So I might just leave it like this for the winter, and come springtime apply a chalkboard to it. We'll see. I'm not 100% certain yet. The paint is still wet, so I just used whatever sandpaper I had. I had this very fine 400 grit, and I don't think it did a good enough job trying to sand it. So I had this kind of more coarse one, and that seemed to do a better job to allow for adhesion. I have a little drip. Don't worry, I need a second coat of paint. So there were areas like right there where the paint didn't seem to, when I painted on the yellow in this particular spot, the primer seemed to rub off, even though the primer was completely dry. and I think that's just because of how the epoxy wasn't sanded enough. But the paint I'm using is Bare Ultra stain blocking primer and paint, and this is exterior semi-gloss. I just like the look of it, and the color, in case you're curious, I can get the color codes if you really want to know. But this is what the tabletop will look like over the winter. Anyways, thank you for watching Computer Tech and More. And if you have any questions about how I constructed or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer it in the comments below. Otherwise, have a great day. And just a quick update, this is what everything looks like outside. So the board is not perfectly level. That was just because of warping in one of these boards. So that's just holding it together. This one is removable. Trying to do it one-handed is a little hard. Second bench. That's the underside. There's the open. And I could have a sand or water and chalkboard on the inside, or chalk or storage on the inside. And that's my kiddo's picnic table.